Chapter 37. Salem Supreme. Aunt Gloria loomed over Marcus in her dressing gown like a force 10 gale. "What do you know, Marcus? Where's Salem?" She grabbed Marcus's sleeve. "Say something! Speak!" Detective Inspector Pierce led her back to her chair. Mum brought Marcus a drink of lemonade and led him to another chair, but he refused to sit down or take the drink. He shook his head and his hood fell back. Then he wiped his face on his sleeve and looked up and stared at me. I remembered to lift up my lips, which Mr. Shepherd says to do when you meet somebody new because it means you can be their friend. But Marcus's lips didn't move, which meant he didn't want to be my friend. "Marcus is here to say sorry," Detective Inspector Pierce said. "He was too frightened to come forward earlier. He thought he'd get into trouble. Now he's told us what he knows. I have here the statement he made earlier, and his story starts out just as Ted worked it out." She nodded at Kat. "With Kat's help, I understand." "My help?" said Kat. "I'd never worked it out without you, Kat," I said. Detective Inspector Pierce continued. "Marcus's mum is outside in a squad car with another officer, waiting. She wanted you to hear his story too. When he's done, we'll take them home." "But I don't understand." Rashid squeezed his knuckles into his head. "Marcus and Salem spent several hours together the day Salem disappeared," Inspector Pierce explained. "Didn't you, Marcus?" Marcus nodded. "By arrangement, then Marcus went back to Manchester on his own. Salem didn't go, but he was supposed to, wasn't he, Marcus?" Marcus nodded again. "You see, Salem had planned to run away." "No," Aunt Gloria moaned, putting her head in her hands. "But he didn't. Not in the end. He changed his mind." Aunt Gloria looked up. "He changed his mind?" she said softly. She nodded. "That's right. He changed his mind. Do you want to explain, Marcus?" Detective Inspector Pierce asked. "Or would you rather I read your statement?" There was a pause, and Marcus put his hood back up to his face, so his face was hidden again. A voice you could hardly hear said, "The statement, miss." So Detective Inspector Pierce read out Marcus's statement, and this is what it said. "Police transcript of statement made by witness Marcus Flood. My name is Marcus Flood, and this is the truth. Salem is my best mate because before he joined my school last September, they called him just a boy, but now they don't. I'm not from Pakistan, my mum's from Bangladesh, and my dad's Irish, but that didn't stop Jason Smart grabbing my sandwiches every day and saying, what's the curried goat like today, and throwing them on the floor, even though they were just cheese and tomato. Then Salem joined my class and sat next to me. They called him that boy too, number 2, but he didn't take any notice. Even when Jason Smart grabbed his sandwiches and threw them on the floor, saying that he smelled worse than a yak's bum. The next day, Jason Smart opened his own sandwich box and there were 1,000 maggots heaving in it. The whole class was in fits. Salem went from being that boy, number 2, to Mosher, Salem Supreme, and since I was his friend, we were Moshers together. We had our shirts half tucked in and half out, the top Moshers of 9K. When you're a Mosher, you're not supposed to be keen. You sit at the back of the class and look dead bored. But with drama it was different. We were the Mosher keeners because Mr. Davidson was so cool. He chose us to star in the school play at Easter, The Tempest. Mr. Davidson played Prospero. Salem was Ferdinand and I was Miranda. The girl. My voice hadn't broken then. I had a long dark wig to wear and a white dress, and every time I said I was certainly a maid, the whole class cheered and stamped their feet, and I'd roll my eyes and everybody went, "Ooh la la." Mr. Davison said I was a comic genius. Then, after Easter, Salem came back to school with bad news. His mum was moving to New York, taking him with her. I was gutted. I sat in science and technology thinking how I'd pinch some chemicals and swallow them because I couldn't stand the thought of going back to being that boy. Without Salem, that's what I'd be. Salem didn't want to go either. He asked his dad if he could go and live with him, but his dad said no. Then his mum booked the tickets. There was a fly out from London so that she and Salem could visit these relations they hadn't seen in years, called the Sparks. Salem said the Sparks could burn in hell. I said at least he'd get to fly to London Eye, which was something we'd always dreamed of doing together. But Salem said flying it without me wouldn't be any fun. That's when we had the big idea. We'd meet up, me and my Miranda disguise, and ride the London Eye together. Then he'd take the disguise and vanish, and together we'd run off, leaving him and his mum and the Sparks behind. We'd get a train back to Manchester together later that day, and then he'd hide out somewhere and I'd bring him food. And when his mum's flight had taken off to New York without him, he'd go and live with his dad, and his dad would have no choice but to say yes. Then he and I can go on being the top moshers of 9K. The first thing I did was ring Christy, my big brother. Christy's down in London and he's always calling to ask for money, and Dad tells him he's not a bottomless pit and to get lost. This time I rang him. I said if he met me at the London Eye and helped me and my mate Salem carry out this joke we were planning, we'd give him a tenner, and he said yes. Salem went down to London with his mum on Sunday. The next day I told my mum I was off out for dinner with the Scouts, and she believed me and even gave me some money. Plus Salem had given me his savings, so I had more than enough to buy 2 London Eye tickets. Then I hopped on an early train to London and didn't pay a penny because of this trick I'd known, and I'd dodged the ticket collectors. I got off at Euston Station and found my way down the river, and there was the Eye. You couldn't miss it. Christy showed up first, and I put on the wig and I'd worn as Miranda, and these slick sunglasses I bought on the Costa del Sol last summer, plus a jacket I'd pinched from Shannon, my older sister. Christy wore his head off and said I was crazy, transvestite, and Dad would skin me alive if he could see me. We bought 2 tickets. I didn't tell him that Salem was going to run away, and I wasn't going to hide him. I said we were playing a joke on Salem's cousins, the Sparks. My voice had broken since being in the play. No way I could go up to the Spark cousin myself. You'd have spotted if I wasn't a girl the moment I'd opened my mouth. That's why we needed Christy. Plus, he was an adult and nobody would ask any questions when we bought the tickets. We'd got the tickets and I called Salem to see where he was. Hurry up, I said. We're boarding at 11:30. He said he was just coming over the river, and minutes later he arrived. The mums went off for coffee, just as we'd planned, and Salem and the 2 Sparks cousins joined the ticket queue. Christy went over, pretending to be a stranger, although he'd met Salem once before. He gave Salem a ticket and showed him his place in the queue, and then he dashed off to work because he was running late. I nearly died laughing, pretending not to know Salem. I had to bark my cheek all the way to the ramp, and still Salem didn't even look at me, not until we were on the wheel itself. Then the capsule doors closed, and we went up and we split onto our sides. It was magic. Air and light and miles of London, all to ourselves. We were happy. Then we got to the top and Salem went quiet. He was looking straight at the sun. Salem, I said, what are you staring at? Manhattan, he said. It's London, I said, not Manhattan. It's my fate, Marcus. I've got to face it. It was sad then. It sounded like he'd changed his mind about swapping identities, disappearing and coming back with me to Manchester to hide. But when everyone turned to get to the photo taken, he laughed, took the wig off my head and stuck it on his. I took off the jacket, he put it on. I straightened the wig, popped it on the sunglasses. It took seconds, nobody saw us. They were all looking at the other way for their souvenir shop. Then the pod landed. We walked right out under the noses of the Sparks cousins, and you should have seen their freaked out faces. Salem put on this fancy walk, just like a girl, and next he cruised past where his mum was sitting having coffee, and she looked straight at him and didn't even recognise him. I dragged him off before she noticed me, and we disappeared into the crowd. He got his mobile phone out and turned it off. The day's ours, Marcus, he shouted. He thumped me on the back and took off the wig. He left his camera behind with one of the cousins, but between us, we still had some money, so we bought a disposable camera at the chemist and snapped one of me on the bridge. And then he bought hot dogs and Mars bars and Cokes, and we picnicked in the park by the river, and I pretended to be a duck squawking, and Salem said I was a comic genius. Then we went to this square where all these buskers perform. They were dead funny. A juggler on stilts with a tear in his pants, a magician with a silver globe that rolled over his body, a clown that did 10 somersaults and landed on his nose. After the show, Salem gave the clown his last £1. We walked up to Tottenham Court Road and found this shop that sells electric pianos. You could do organ, strings, trumpets and drum beats all at once. It was great, the best day I'd ever had. I wanted it to last forever, but it didn't. We got to Euston Station, and that's when Salem told me he wasn't coming with me. Can't, Marcus, he'd said. You can, it's easy. You hop on and hide in the bog. It's not that. I can't run away. Not from my mum. She's some mum, my mum. But she's the only mum I've got. It's not just her, it's the cousins, Ted and Kat. The Sparks. Thought you said you couldn't care less about them. That was before I met them. They're great, Kat and Ted. If I don't go back, they'll get in trouble for letting me go on the eye by myself. And Mum will be frantic. I didn't know what to say. People rushed by, dashing for trains. Announcements droned on. I heard one from Manchester, my train. You're just a mosher wannabe, I said. Yeah, you're the real mosher, Marcus. I'm not in your league. He smiled. You did the maggots, didn't you? How'd you know? When I was round your house last, your dad told me about his hobby of fishing. Then he gave me back Shannon's pink fluffy jacket. I put it in my backpack along with a wig. I made him keep the sunglasses. They looked good on him. A whistle blew and it was my train. We'd said goodbye and he hugged me. Run, Marcus, I'll send you a card from the Empire State Building. So I ran, doors were slamming and I heard him shout after me, "Don't let me call you that, boy. You're a mosher, Marcus, remember. You're a comic genius." A guard saw me and shouted. I jumped on the train. I only just made it before they locked up the doors. I saw Salem waving as the train pulled out. It was the last time I saw him. I hid in the toilet until after stroke on Trent. At Manchester, I got off without getting caught and went home. "How was the Scouts?" Mum asked. "Fantastic," I said. Later that night, when I was sneaking Shannon's pink jacket back into her wardrobe, I found Salem's mobile phone in the pocket. He'd left it behind, just like he'd left his camera with the cousins. I'd mail it to him when he got to New York, I thought, and I put it in my desk drawer. The next day the police came. They said Salem had gone missing. Mum was there. If I'd admitted to have been with Salem the day before, she'd have been livid. So I'd stuck to the Scout story. But after the police left, I started worrying. Where was Salem? Why hadn't he gone back to Sparks' house like he'd said? I tossed and turned all night. Then today I couldn't take it any more. I took out his phone, meaning to call his mum and tell her what I knew. So I did. I turned it on. There were about 20 voicemail messages, all from her. She sounded terrible. I put her through a call, but it rang and rang. Then she answered and I realised I couldn't face talking to her. I hung up and switched the phone off again. I hid it under my mattress. Then, later, Christy rang me on my mobile. He said Salem's cousin had bumped into him at his motorbike show where he's working. He hadn't given me away, but if I knew where Salem was, I'd better go straight to the police and leave him out of it. He shouted his head off. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I'd get into trouble. Then, tonight, the police showed up, and they knew everything. Salem's cousin Ted had worked it out, they said. They said how it had been with the wig and the eye and jumping on the train. It was like Ted Spark had been in my head, seeing my thoughts. And I remember Salem saying how he had some weird syndrome that made him think like a giant computer. So this is the truth, and nothing but the truth. I last saw Salem at Euston train station. This is all I know. Marcus Flood. Chapter 38. Retracing the Steps. When the Detective Inspector Pierce finished reading out Margaret's statement, it was 10:03 p.m. Aunt Gloria looked at Margaret with an expression that was off the Richter scale. Her bottom lip hung down, tears fell down, that she didn't bother to wipe away. Richie sat on the dining table, completely motionless, and his head between his hands. Detective Inspector Pierce leaned forward and his knuckles tight. "Marcus," she said, "I want you to think. Take your time. Was there anything Salem said? Anything that you might give us a clue where he went the next?" Marcus shook his head. "No, that's it. I told you everything I remember. He said he was coming straight back here, honest to God." "Did he say how?" "No, he had a travel card. He'd shown me it earlier." He pulled the hood down more over his face. The policewoman who was looking after him put an arm around him. "I want to go home now," came his voice, muffled. Detective Inspector Pierce nodded. "Take him home," she said. "If he remembers anything else, call me right away." Marcus led to the door, but just as it was about to go, Aunt Gloria stood up. "Marcus," she said. The room went quiet. Marcus paused but didn't turn around. "I want you to know, Marcus, know it from me, Salem's mother. This was none of your fault." Then she sat down and groaned. Marcus shuffled over to her. "I forgot," he said, "to give you this." He held out his hand. In it was Salem's mobile. Aunt Gloria took it from him with shaking fingers. She held it up to her cheek. "Oh, Salem," she whispered to it, "where are you?" Marcus and his police escort left. Detective Inspector Pierce touched Aunt Gloria on the shoulder and said how she was going back to headquarters to mount a London-wide search. The workers in the underground, the bus drivers who went through Euston would be questioned. She'd leave no stone unturned, she said. Then she left too, and Aunt Gloria started crying again. Then Mum and Kat and me up to bed. We didn't even try to go to sleep. Kat sat up on the lilo. I sat up in my bed. I had the bedside light up on. My head thumped. "Ted," Kat said. "What?" "You thought you'd found him, and you hadn't. He's gone again." "Yes, Kat, gone. I don't like it, Ted," she shivered. "Inspector Pierce doesn't like it either." "No. All along she thought Salem would run away. Now she doesn't think so anymore." "No? There are only two possibilities, Ted." "What?" Either he ran away or he was kidnapped. Kidnapped? Yes. But why? Aunt Gloria isn't a millionaire, is she? Oh, Ted, you're so young. Kids get kidnapped for other reasons. What other reasons? Stop looking at me like a duck that's forgotten how to quack. I stopped tilting my head and blinked. What other reasons? Cat? Stuff. My hand shook itself out. Cat lay down, curling up. She didn't go to sleep. I heard no lapping like a dog drinking. After a long while, I turned on the radio. It was a shipping forecast at midnight. The general synopsis at 0000 hours issued by the Met Office. Fitzroy mainly northerly, 5 or 6 becoming variable, thundery. Fourth time, Doggers 6 or 7. Down south, the rain came in. The wind rose, and I heard tree branches tapping the roof of our garden shed. I thought of the washing line, soaked again. Squalls of hard raindrops drummed against the window. I got out my weather book and looked up the section of the Coriolis effect. I heard Salem's voice at Euston Station talking to Marcus. They're great, Cat and Ted. I thought of the boy on the slab, and I thought of Salem, somewhere in the great silent void or lying somewhere out there in the growing storm. 2 possibilities, hiding or kidnapped. Switch it off, Ted, the radio is driving me nuts. It was Cat. I switched it off. Oh, I can't sleep, she moaned. Cat, you know the theories, the 9 theories? Oh, not them again, please. One of them was right, wasn't it? Yeah, number 6, clever clogs. But you remember how I first thought of 8 and then later I thought of a 9th? So? Maybe what you said earlier isn't true. What do you mean? Well, you said there's only 2 theories. Either he's hiding or he's kidnapped. But maybe there's a 3rd theory, like a 9th one before. One that we haven't thought of yet? Cat was listening now. She got up and switched on the main light. Now you're talking, she said. A 3rd theory. There must be one. She walked up and down beside the Lilo, thumping into a fist into a palm, like a stone hitting paper in the stone scissors paper game you play when you're small. It was the one game I knew how to play, and it was my favourite. I made a scissors out of my hand. It was like a 3rd theory we were trying to find. I thought out loud. Maybe Salem went missing again deliberately. Willingly. Maybe Marcus is lying. Cat stopped pacing. She looked at me. Marcus was telling the truth. How do you know? I just know. It's a body language thing, Ted. Like how I know that the 9th theory was wrong. It's the same now. I just know the way Marcus said. Salem didn't mean to vanish. He meant to come back here. He changed his mind about running away. So that means he vanished unwillingly. Yeah. She sat down on the bed. There were only 2 possibilities, Ted. There are only 2 theories. He either vanished of his own accord or of somebody else's. Somebody else's, I repeated, which means that somebody out there is holding him. Holding him? I got out of bed and opened the window. Somebody out there, I repeated. Then the northeasterly wind blew in. The papers on my desk flew across the room. A leaf came in. I thought about the Coriolis effect. I could smell the outside. I could smell London. Somebody out there, Cat whispered, joining me at the window. She put her arm round my shoulders. Or something, I said. The gale came into the room for a few seconds more, then Cat shut the window again. What do you mean, something? I don't know, I said. Maybe something got in Salem's way and deflected him off course, like the Coriolis effect. That puts the wind off course all the time. And it's not a person, it's a thing. It's a thing you don't even see. Do you mean he met with an accident? I don't know, maybe. Okay, he met with an accident of some kind and couldn't get home. But he'd have shown up, his body would have been found, or he'd been in a hospital somewhere. The police would have found him, unless... Cat's hands went up to her neck. Her eyes were large and round. Unless what? I said. Unless he fell in the river? Unless he drowned? I thought of the cormorants ducking and diving. My hand flapped. You just fall in the river, Cat. There are walls all around. You have to throw yourself in deliberately. Cat gasped. Her eyes got even bigger. Maybe Salem did. Throw himself in? No, I said. Cat stared. I put my flapping hand on her soft, bony shoulder. No, I said. She breathed out. No, you're right, Salem. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. She shook her head. Okay, it's his Coriolis thingy. What was it? I don't know, I said. I put my hand up to my head and shook it. I'm trying to think, but my brain's tired. Let's be Salem, Ted. Let's both imagine we're on Euston Station. Let's retrace his steps in our heads, remember? He doesn't know London well. Here's a travel card, right? Right, Cat. He's waving Marcus goodbye. Got that? Yep. Then what? He looks at his watch. It's 4 o'clock. And he knows Aunt Glo will be frantic, so he goes to get his phone. He realises he doesn't have it. He left it in the pink fluffy jacket. So he goes to a public phone, right? She frowned. Wrong. He didn't have the money. He'd spent it all. Disposable camera, the Mars bar, the copes, the buskers. Yeah, of course. All he's got is a travel card, so he decides just to get home. He goes down the underground. How do you know, Ted? Well, it's the fastest, and the easiest if you don't know London. Okay. He looked at the London Underground map. He's already been on the Northern Line this morning. He's not stupid, and it's simple. From Euston to our stop, it's direct. It's no changing. Easy. He goes to the platform and he gets on. Euston, Tottenham Court Road, Leicester Square, Embankment, Waterloo, I said. Then to our stop, Ted. He gets out, he gets the lift, he gets back to ground level, he shows his travel card, or puts it through the barrier, and then he's back here. We're just round the corner from the tube. Cat blew out a hot, angry breath. It's useless, Ted. He might have got confused about which direction to take when he got out the main road. I do. Cat stared at me. I don't think so. What's Salem? He'd walked the way with us just that morning. It's dead easy. It's 200 metres down the main road, past the barracks, and the left onto Rivington Street, and then our house halfway down. I nodded. Our house halfway down. Cat slumped back down on her lilo. It's useless, Ted. Useless, I said. My hand started shaking itself out. My head went off to the side. What did you say, Cat? I said, say it again. Useless? Not that, what you said before, from the bit from the main road. 200 metres down the main road, past the barracks, and then she stopped. She stared. In the pod, Cat, at the top. Marcus said he was staring straight at the sun. He was looking south. He was looking at Manhattan, Cat murmured. He wasn't looking at Manhattan, Cat, or the sun. He was looking at something that reminded him of Manhattan. A big tower block. He was looking at the barracks. That's something, Cat said. That's it. That's the Corollius thingy. That's the thingy that made him go off course. Then she shook her head. But Ted, he was anxious to get home. Surely he wouldn't have stopped and gone wandering off into the barracks. He likes tall buildings, Cat, I said. Cat nodded. He had his disposable camera. He might have wanted to take some pictures. I nodded. It was a fine day, Cat. Good views. Views which he knew soon wouldn't exist anymore. Besides, Ted, he may have dreaded Aunt Glo going ballistic when he showed up. A little delay may be appealing. He goes into the barracks just for a quick look. Then what? Dad came home that evening. He said he made it secure. He locked it up. He hasn't been back since. He said he'd been down Peckham today on another site. He locked it up, Cat, with Salem inside. And nobody's there since. Salem's in there, Cat, trapped. And the concrete crushers. They're going in tomorrow.